Hi, hello, and welcome to my channel. I am so excited for today's video because we are finally reading our book cover books. If you didn't see my most recent bookstore vlog, I basically ran around the bookstore and took a bunch of pictures of some really cool book covers, split them into 3 different categories because there was very specific themes within the book covers. And then I asked you guys in that video to vote on one book from each category that you would like me to read in another video. This is that other video. I have already said this in a couple of different videos, but one last time, thank you again to anyone that voted in that video. I am a very small channel, so I wasn't sure what to expect. I was honestly prepared to not get any votes, but I did, and I'm really, really excited about it. That was super, super fun for me, and I definitely want to do more voting type of things in the future. Anyway, let's go ahead and finally reveal the winners. The books that you voted for, books that I will be reading in this video. The very first category that we had is definitely the book cover that I'm usually the most drawn to and the one that I kind of like instantly spot out in a bookstore. Kind of more of a simplistic design, but with bright, bold colors, usually only like 1 or 2 colors. And the options for this category were Tiny Nightmares, Memorial, The Lemon, Mouth to Mouth, and Death in Her Hands. We had a tie between Tiny Nightmares, which was honestly the book that I was the most drawn to out of all of them. And going into like asking you guys to vote, that is the one that I was kind of in the back of my head hoping would get the most votes. But in a surprising little twist, again, we had a tie, and I ended up going with the other book, which was Memorial by Bryan Washington. I ended up going with this one over Tiny Nightmares because this is actually a book that I have seen so many times at the bookstore, and every time I see it, I gravitate toward it. So I feel like this was a good opportunity to finally read this book. Also, too, my sister was one of the people that voted, and she voted for this one, so I figured I would read this one. The second category was kind of a mixture of 2 different things that I like, just because I didn't want there to be like 1,000 different categories. They all kind of have like weird or kind of honestly suggestive imagery, but it's also very simplistic, and they all have like a bold color choice in them for the most part. And the options that we had for this category were Acts of Desperation, A Touch of Jen, Bad Fruit, Acts of Service, and Lapvona. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. And this category winner was a complete landslide. Every single vote was for Bad Fruit by Ella King. I love the imagery of this book cover. It very much reminds me of Night Bitch, which is my absolute favorite book cover that I have of all of my books on my bookshelf. I did end up DNFing that book, so I don't know if that's gonna be a sign, but I just really love kind of like the odd but very simple and pretty imagery of this book. And then the last and final category that we had, our third one, was a book cover style that I have just recently become very obsessed with, and that's basically kind of more of an oil painting style cover, like really pretty, just really pretty covers that look like they could be paintings. And the choices that we have for this one were Sirens and Muses, Woman Eating, A Certain Hunger, and Big Swiss. And if I remember correctly, I do feel like the votes were kind of a little all over the place. But there was definitely a winner, and that one was Sirens and Muses by Antonia Ingris. And I'm really glad that this book won because this is literally the most beautiful book I have ever seen. Honestly, this category out of any of the other ones, I can definitely see myself eventually purchasing all of the books in that category because they're just super, super pretty. And here's what all of the covers kind of look like together, which is also another reason why I ended up picking up Memorial versus Tiny Nightmares, because all of them have orange in them. The orange in this one's kind of over here. All of these covers kind of have orange, so they looked really nice together as well. So those are all of the books that we picked together for this book cover reading video, and I'm super excited and like anxious to get into the books because I have no idea what any of these are about. I'm very curious to see if the covers that I'm drawn to are actually good books. I think it's only appropriate to start with Bad Fruit because it is the one out of any of the categories that got the most votes. And again, I have no idea what this book is about, so let's go ahead and read the little synopsis and find out together. Just graduated from high school and waiting to start college at Oxford, Lily lives under the scrutiny of her volatile Singaporean mother, May, and is unable to find kinship with her elusive British father, Charlie. When May suspects that Charlie is having an affair, there's only one thing that calms May down: a glass of perfectly spoiled orange juice served by Lily, who must always taste it first to make sure it's just right. So that, I think, explains the orange slices on the front cover. As her mother becomes increasingly unhinged, Lily starts to have flashbacks that she knows are not her own. Over a sweltering London summer, all semblance of civility and propriety is lost as Lily begins to unravel the harrowing history that has always cast a shadow on her mother. The horrifying secret she uncovers will shake her family to its core, culminating in a shattering revelation that will finally set Lily free. I'm gonna be honest, normally family drama type things are not really my vibe, but I'm excited to start reading anyway. Also too, I did want to show you what the actual hardcover itself looks like because this is a pretty cute hardcover. It's really simple, obviously, it's just orange, but I love the fact that it is orange because the whole thing apparently is about some spoiled orange juice. And then the lettering on the side is also orange, but like a different color and foiled, which is super, super pretty. So interestingly, this book actually has a table of contents, and I don't know that I've ever seen like a fiction book have a table of contents before. It's giving very like short story vibes or like poem vibes. The synopsis definitely talks about a specific person in her life. So I'm wondering if this is like an actual just like story, like a normal kind of book, or if it's like just random stories about this person's life. But I guess really the only thing we can do is read and find out. Page 3, but we've already hit the point where it's talking about like the orange juice that the mom likes that it was talking about in the synopsis. And it's kind of gross. It says, the kind of juice mama likes is juice past its use-by date. She likes the fizz in it, the sour tang. I would have been fine with this if she kept it to herself, but mama can't be alone in anything. Someone has to taste it to make sure it hovers in that sliver of perfection between expired and putrid. Ugh. Alright, I've been reading for a little bit of time. I'm on chapter 6, which is called Doctor. First off, with the whole chapter thing, they're definitely not random short stories. The chapters are literally just titled with something that has to do in that particular chapter. I don't think that I've ever seen a book do that before, but I do actually really like it. It kind of like gives you an idea or like a little clue into what the poem. I said poem because I just read poem on the first chapter. It gives you a little bit of a clue into what that chapter is going to be about. The chapters seem to be pretty short so far, so it's definitely making the reading feel like it's going faster, and then the added bonus of it having like a name. It's just kind of fun, so I'm definitely liking that so far. And the only other thing that I have to update on is the mom in this story is completely unhinged. There's an instance where they're at the supermarket and the mom is just having like a complete meltdown. Like, can you imagine going to the grocery store and having your mom throw glass jars of food at your dad? This is the beginning stages somehow of her being unhinged. So I'm very worried for Lily. I'm interested in this story and I definitely do want to finish the book, but at the same time, as of right now, like the thought of continuing reading is the last thing that I want to do. I need to switch it up a little bit. So I'm going to set this book to the side for right now and we're going to start our next one, and hopefully, I think I'm just like needing something a little happier because this one is, I don't know. I'll talk about it more as we go along, but I just need a break from it. Again, I have no idea what this book is about, so let's read the back and find out. Benson and Mike live together in Houston. Mike is a Japanese-American chef at a Mexican restaurant, and Ben's a black daycare teacher, and they've been together for a few years. Good years. But now they're not sure why they're still a couple. There's the sex, sure, and the meals Mike cooks for Benson, and well, they love each other. But when Mike finds out his estranged father is dying in Osaka, just as his mother, Mitsuko, arrives in Texas for a visit, Mike picks up and flies across the world to say goodbye. In Japan, he undergoes an extraordinary transformation. Back home, Mitsuko and Benson are stuck living together as unconventional roommates, an absurd domestic situation that leads Benson into a deeper understanding of family and himself. Both men will change in ways that will either make them stronger together or fracture everything they've known. And just maybe, they'll all be okay in the end. Memorial is a funny and profound story about big first loves, family in all its forms, becoming who you're supposed to be, and the limits of love. I have mixed feelings. I'm a little worried that this is going to be not the happy story I'm hoping for. It does say funny and profound, so hopefully there's some humor in here at least. with Benson, so I'm wondering if this is going to be multi-perspective as well. I mean, it does talk equally kind of on the back about both partners, so... Okay, it doesn't seem to switch. Oh, here we go. Okay, Mike. So we've got like a big chunk of Benson and then a big chunk of Mike, so I'm assuming maybe we're going to get Benson's story and then Mike's story. Literally, the very beginning of this book starts off with Mike's taking off for Osaka, but his mother's flying into Houston. Just for a few weeks, he says. Or maybe a couple of months, he says. A couple of months? To live with someone else's parent? Not only is Mike's mother gonna be with Benson for weeks, possibly months, by themselves, he also apparently has never even met her. What? Like, why is that even an option? That would be terrifying to me. Switching books was definitely a good idea. And I did end up reading quite a bit of it last night. I'm on page 132, which was basically all of Benson's kind of side of the story, if you will. So now we're going to be moving on to Mike's, which I'm kind of hesitant to get into. From what Benson has said, it's made me not really like Mike that much. So like now going into his story, I don't really care. You know what I mean? That's my main issue, I think, with books that have multiple perspectives. If the author spends too long in one person's perspective, I stop caring about the other characters as much, and I don't want to leave that story. So I feel like that's kind of happening a little bit here. Like, I wish it was just fully from Benson's point of view, and I'm really liking the dynamic between him and the mom. And I don't want to leave this story to go on to a new one. But I'm going to obviously keep reading anyway. But before I do that, I wanted to mention the writing style of this book is a little different than I think anything else that I've read. First off, this author, at least with this book, doesn't use quotation marks in any of the writing. And then also his thought process jumps from current thoughts to him thinking about things that happened in the past very frequently. It kind of made it a little bit harder to get into because I just felt a little disoriented at first. I was kind of like, what is going on? And Benson's point of view also was the full timeline of Mike's time with his dad in Osaka. So I'm assuming that Mike's perspective is going to be that same kind of like timeline. And yeah, let's find out what's been going on with Mike. It has been quite some time since the last time I talked to you guys. I have finished both of these books, and I did actually start our third one. Actually, I did more than start it. I'm like, I want to say a third of the way through our last book, and I've decided to just end the video today. That being said, I am going to talk more in detail about both of these books, and then I'll talk very briefly about this one, and then that'll be it for this video because I need to move on to something else. So we're going to go ahead and start off with Memorial because I'm pretty sure that was the book that I left off on in the last clip that you saw. And I'm pretty sure at that point we were already finished with Benson's first section and then we were going into Mike's section, which the way that this book is structured, basically you get a big huge chunk of Benson's story, which I loved, and then you jump into a big old chunk of Mike's story, which is basically the same time frame, and then at the very end we go back to Benson's point of view and we finish off the story. I went into this book hoping that it would be kind of like more humorous and funny, and I did love that Mike and Benson both had like a very kind of like dry, sarcastic kind of way of speaking, but it wasn't necessarily something that I would consider funny or humorous, especially because of the things that they were like talking about and dealing with. And I'm gonna be honest, the ending is kind of what officially killed it for me. Memorial specifically had one of those types of endings that are pretty much my least favorite, where it feels very open-ended and it doesn't really feel like things were very tied up. it kind of makes it feel almost like, what was the point of me reading this if you're not going to tell me what happens, kind of a thing. I read a bunch of Goodreads reviews after finishing this book, and a lot of people in the reviews said that they liked Mike's story more than they liked Benson's. And I do agree with those reviews where they said that Mike's story just had kind of like more things going on. It was a little bit more interesting. But that being said, Benson's story definitely won out for me because of Benson and Mike's mom's dynamic. I love their story, and I would have loved for the whole book to just be them. And I do feel like overall I would give this like 3.5 stars. If you're someone that likes kind of more real life reading, this I do feel like would be a good book to pick up. I'm not one of those people. Now let's go ahead and move on to Bad Fruit, which is the book that we started this video off with. I left off on chapter 16, which was page 112, and literally a couple pages later on page 114 to 115, there's like a moment between Lily and a friend that she's made during the process of this book where she's kind of like confiding in him. Basically, she's living this life where she's getting verbally abused and just kind of being tormented by her mom, and she just kind of like feels very alone and feels very like it's starting to like really grate on her, all of these things that she's having to deal with. And she tells him, "I feel unreal, like I'm unraveling and no one's watching." And his response to that, he says something so quietly, I'm unsure I've heard him. It could have been, "You've got me, I'm watching." It was just such like a sweet little moment, and yeah, it definitely got me like right back in the story. So overall, again, I also think I'm gonna rate this probably around a 3.5, like maybe Memorial is a 3-star and this one's like a 3.5 star because like I said, I did enjoy this one a little bit more, like the actual story itself, and I feel like it should come with a lot of trigger warnings. It's mostly like emotional, verbal abuse, but there's also physical abuse, self-harm, essay, any trigger warning that you can think of, it's probably in here. Pretty much every single character in this story has some sort of trauma in their past or are presently dealing with some sort of trauma, so it's just kind of like a downer of a book, especially reading these two like back to back essentially. These two books single-handedly put me in one of the worst reading slumps. I'm still trying to get out of it. Now let's go ahead and get into our third book, which is Sirens and Muses. And here's our little book cover, which again, still like the most beautiful cover I've ever seen. This is basically about 4 artists, 3 of them being students and one of them being kind of more of like a professor at this like elite art school. And it basically talks about their lives and their kind of like struggles with being artists at an elite art school kind of a thing. And honestly, when I read that, I was kind of like, oh, it didn't sound like something I wanted to read, quite frankly. But again, because we were doing this video, I forced myself to start it. And like I said, I'm like a third of the way through and I'm really enjoying it so far. Nothing crazy has gone on so far. We're just kind of like getting to know all the characters. Like I mentioned, the synopsis talked about 4 different characters and you do get all of their perspectives. There are, of course, certain people's perspectives that I prefer, like their storylines I prefer, which oddly, or maybe not oddly enough, is the female characters. There's 2 female characters and 2 male characters, the professor being one of the male characters, and yeah, I'm just preferring the 2 female characters probably because I can relate to them a little bit more. Also too, I really like the dynamic so far of the 2 female characters together. The synopsis does kind of allude to a potential kind of like romance between them, and we're getting like little teeny snippets of that, which I'm really liking, but yeah, nothing so far has like really caught my attention to make me obviously like just keep reading it like I normally read. I feel like if I wasn't kind of like trying to get out of a reading slump, I would be more interested in this. So that being said, I've kind of decided again to just cut the video here, and I'm just gonna give myself the time and opportunity to really enjoy this book and read it on my own time and not rush it for the purposes of this video. Anyway, I think that's everything that I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, even though this was kind of a tough one for me to get through. And I think I literally sat in this one chair the entire time, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway. I hope you have / have had the most amazing of days, and I will hopefully see you guys in the next one. Bye!